Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, we're talking about much vigilance about nothing. I thought of the title of the book, Much Ado About Nothing, when I was thinking about making this video. What made me think of making this video was a recent article from the Bangkok Post, bangkokpost.com. Article is titled, PM Urges Vigilance After COVID-19 Surge. Quoting directly, and I honestly didn't even really want to quote much from this article, and I'll get into why here in a minute, as usual, I urge those who are watching this video, go check out that article, read it in detail, make up your own mind. That said, quoting directly, Prime Minister Srettha Thavisin has ordered local authorities to monitor COVID-19 cases after infections spiked during Songkran. Infections of what? A cold? Quoting further, Deputy Prime Minister's Office spokeswoman Kanika Onchit said on Friday that the Prime Minister and public health officials had raised concerns about the possibility of a further outbreak. Again, a further outbreak of what? You know, I think the one thing we can objectively say about everything that's happened since Q1 of 2020 and all of the hyperbole and, quite honestly, overreach, and this is not confined to Thailand, in other jurisdictions, including the United States, I think one thing we can objectively say is at the very least, this was a massive overreaction to something that, quite honestly, never deserved the kind of overreaction that came about. And honestly, if there's any guilty party, if you want to use that terminology, if there's any guilty party to point the so-called dirty end of the stick at with regard to that overreaction, it's the media, who basically seem to have gone out of their way to sensationalize and hype this up out of all proportion, resulting in, and again, I've got serious problems with the way that the WHO operated in all of this, especially when you understand the way that the management, if you want to call it that, or the Politburo that runs the thing, how they operate and who the head of that organization is. I mean, that gives you a lot of insight into the thinking of the, I've done the videos on this before. Tedros, who runs the WHO, is literally a communist. He was a communist apparatchik, operator, whatever you want to call it, from Ethiopia, who, to the best of my research, seems to have completely bungled a cholera outbreak, I believe, in that particular jurisdiction. So they decided to kick him upstairs to head up the WHO. That's, again, I'm not saying I'm the end-all be-all authority on that. It's just basic research that I've done on Google leads me to that conclusion. And quite honestly, I've noticed that over time, much of the source material that led me to make those conclusions has been, if not scrubbed from the internet, it certainly does not come up when you first do searches on that individual. That being said, in fact, Wikipedia at one time even had on their entry regarding him that he was a member of the Communist Party over in that country, and then now, last time I checked, that doesn't come up anymore in that entry. It's interesting stuff. In any event, again, I think you could call COVID at the very least as an overreaction, and then at the same time, there seemed to be a lot of opportunistic bureaucrats and what do you want to call it? The international nomenclatura used it as an opportunity to try and exercise almost dictatorial-like powers, over the vast populations of the earth. In short, it was terrible, and it was apropos of nothing, really, when you look back on it. Objectively, I don't think that the numbers warranted it. And then now, where they talk the original numbers, especially when you get into, back in the United States, for example, how death certificates were filled out with regard to whether or not someone had this disease. There was a lot of chicanery going on there because you had primary and secondary causes of death, and you had doctors adding stuff on. Then when you couple that with the incentive structure created by the so-called CARES Act, which basically saw hospitals and things being remunerated with more money just by basically labeling things as COVID, you start to understand how this hysteria sort of enters into a feedback loop and then created the scenarios that we saw over the course of 3 years. Meanwhile, here in Thailand, as a practical matter, we essentially saw our economy shut down for 3 years. Now, to Thailand's credit, to the government's credit at the time, They did everything they could to keep the country open in terms of tourism. Now, there were tons of hoops that we had to jump through, and I did all the videos about that at the time. But Thailand, to its credit, did stay open. Other jurisdictions here, which I find it interesting now in this sort of tourism Cold War that we're seeing in Southeast Asia, everyone seems to forget that places like Vietnam not only shut people out, they started expelling people from the country. Meanwhile, Thailand was letting people in, again, under certain conditions, and went out of their way to grant discretionary authority to the immigration apparatus to allow people who basically got stuck in Thailand to remain. So in my opinion, Thailand did about the best job they possibly could under the circumstances, and I think Thailand acted in good faith. Don't necessarily think that's the case when it comes to organizations such as the WHO and some other places out there, but I'll leave that for another discussion. Long story short, I think the Prime Minister's office could worry about a lot more important things than being quote unquote vigilant regarding COVID.